Okay, so thanks everyone for joining Rohit and myself. I'm here with Rohit Chauhan, who leads AI at Mastercard. And Rohit and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and we share kind of I think the enthusiasm for from machine learning and AI, what it can do. But I think we also both kind of understand the limitations. So Rohit, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Rohit, I wanted to talk to you today, obviously about ML integrity, and I want to start off by actually kind of acknowledging that I think that Mastercard is of course kind of way ahead of its time, and I think that like already on when you look at like kind of Mastercard's website on data responsibility principles, um, it mentions integrity, right? And integrity on like on the Mastercard's like data responsibility principle like website is describes it as being deliberate in how we use data and technologies such as artificial intelligence in order to minimize biases, inaccuracies, and unintended consequences. So I'm curious, Rahi, like, why do you think integrity in machine learning in AI is so important to Mastercard?
Super. Banks learn from their own transaction and fraud experience. However, Mastercard has the unique opportunity to learn from the data set for our entire ecosystem, and hence it puts us in a position where we want to develop products that would help banks to further enhance their fraud prevention efforts. Equally important to us is that these products are adhere to our values and our safety and security standards. Hence, integrity matters to us when we use machine learning. Effective ways of driving integrity in AI is allowing our teams to detect risk with regards to bias, inaccuracies, or harm during the pre-development stage. Rather than, we truly believe that rather than kind of it being seen as something that will stifle innovation, we believe that it empowers the team to manage and build more ethical products, ethical development processes to
Right.
create human-centric products. So we feel that this is kind of just part of being in the game and the best practices as it exists.
So yeah, and like obviously at Mastercard, like you've been applying machine learning for decades, right? Like when it comes to fraud detection, and it is always kind of has to be like very human centric, right? So I think kind of like if for people watching us, like they're thinking about like okay, I'm on board. We want to introduce integrity like into our organization. So I'm curious, like what sort of if you had to kind of like think of like the major things or the major steps that Mastercard is doing to like introduce integrity into machine learning. What do you think are the kind of like those like kind of the major pillars of that?
So we have an AI governance process that is integrated to a machine learning model development process, right from the initial concept to the post-deployment model management. So it is right like in the entire life cycle, there is like a governance that kind of is the overarching umbrella. And there are five dimensions to this governance: it's efficacy, it's fairness, it's preservation, it's transparency, and it's security. So they are like these are the key pillars that all our governance is kind of anchored on. Rolling this out has been a process. It took us a little bit of time to kind of just institutionalize this particular process across the organization. But over time, we have been sort of modifying the process to make it more effective. We are kind of changing and further kind of refining some of the tests that we were doing with regards to bias testing. But as it stands right now, it has now become kind of ingrained in our machine learning development life cycles.
So then that makes a lot of sense. And when you're talking about kind of like AI governance across the organization, I know you guys have many data science teams, kind of, and I know kind of spread across different regions of the globe. And of course, like there are different models and different applications, right? So how does an organization like that, like I'm curious, like um how do you think about this from, like company wide, like kind of setting company wide model standards, or kind of setting these like kind of like across the entire organization? Like how does one do that in a really multinational company?
So there is like the model governance process that I spoke about. So every time a business unit is interested in kind of in building an AI module and so on and so forth, they have to fill out a pre-solution kind of evaluation.
Mhm.
And this in this evaluation, the committee decides that is this particular use case high risk or low risk. And this is no different from how some of the regulations that are being kind of built across the globe. Like for example, models that kind of are used for credit, credit risk are considered high risk. However, a AI model that is like a product recommender is would be considered low risk, and our governance is no different. That ecosystem is going to use the pre-model build evaluation spreadsheets to figure out is this model that you guys are proposing or a business unit is proposing, is it high risk or low risk, and based on that it'll have different set of criterias on which the evaluation would be done with regards to bias testing, and how and all the data evaluations that is done on exactly where the data is being sourced, what permissions do we have, how will the model get deployed, what will be the frequency when the model kind of would be tested for drifts and so on and so forth. So
Yeah,
it is, and we understand that the regulation is changing as well.
yeah.
So as regulations are changing and new guidance coming from Europe and other regions, we go back and relook at our criteria to see that are there other model categories that are being now kind of being flagged as high risk and so on and so forth. So we use our own internal guidelines. At the same time, we always refreshing those guidelines with published guidelines that might be coming or recommendations that may be coming from regulatory bodies.
So that makes a lot of sense, right? And so we're seeing kind of like as AI is developing, we're also seeing kind of like regulation, right, catching up and developing, and kind of like more, right, kind of like there are more rules kind of like being set in place. But I think like like there's and at the same time, like what we're also seeing is we're also seeing obviously AI developing, right? So maybe when we're thinking about maybe like 10 years ago, when we're thinking about what is an AI model, like the model itself is a pretty kind of small binary, right? But now I think when we're looking at, what is a model, especially when we're thinking about, and NLP models and, and kind of things like that, right? Then we're looking at like very like kind of massive models like that, like of taking massive data, like requiring a lot of kind of like training them is like difficult. So testing them, is also something that is probably like, a very big challenge. So I'm curious, like, and obviously an organization like Mastercard is dealing with like, just massive data as well, right? So like for organizations that they're I guess maybe privileged to work with like the data set at that scale, like what are some of the best practices, right, that allow to like instill machine learning integrity when we're thinking about models at scale, right, which is different from maybe like how we would be thinking about like kind of traditional model risk management when we're thinking about kind of like more traditional models.
So you're absolutely right. At Mastercard, we run live global scale models that are literally scoring many billion transactions on a daily basis. So the scale is like enormous. And when you have that level of scale, we invest in effective tool processes and roles. So I want to emphasize all three things. It is tools, it is processes, and it is effective rules, which people are kind of responsible for the monitoring of this. And that and these people are not just there to make sure that the job runs properly, but they're there for orchestration, for code versioning, for model testing. Like before things go live, we are refreshing some of these models at a very high frequency, and it goes through a slew of different kind of tests and monitoring. We're always monitoring, alerting, like escalation, like what exactly happens if if we see certain kind of trends hitting a certain threshold. So it's a lot of investment in the ecosystem, because at the scale at which we operate, without that level of investment, I think it is not prudent for us to be to sort of deploy them at scale without actually putting an ecosystem that can keep the model and our customers safe.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that should apply, like I think also to startups. I think it sort of sounds like kind of tools, right, and accountability, right, is are kind of like major pillars of making sure that like that these things are executed properly. And so I guess like when so we have these rules in place, and and we do the best that we can. But what happens generally, like how does a team like monitor for things that they go wrong when it's maybe when it's kind of like hard to go wrong. So one of the things that one of the things that we're seeing is like in general is we're seeing a lot of what we call silent errors, right? So with silent errors, then basically we're kind of seeing the case where model is making a prediction, right? So input is coming into the model is producing a prediction, but somehow there's something wrong with that prediction, right? Maybe it's wrong, or it's biased, or there's certain aspects of it. So, how does like, are there any kind of like tips for how to, and we call these like silent errors, right? Because like the model's producing a prediction, so it looks okay, right? But in fact, there's something wrong with that prediction. Yeah. So what is a good set of practices for like dealing with these silent errors?
That's a really good question. And I think if I have to go back and give you like a really candid answer, silent errors are errors that should be tested during the development cycle. You want to make sure that you go back, and training data can give you the variety of input that you have seen in the past, but limiting the model, or just or not kind of fully thinking through what are the other kind of input characteristics that potentially may come through, and not planning for that is like just walking into a landmine, because you don't want a model in production without fully understanding what a different variety, or an input combination that you have never seen, and how exactly the model is going to react. So I think the my recommendation is that we do whatever we can to do the silent error testing during development. Now, are we like 100% sure, 100% positive that all the different kind of possibilities have been tested? Um, the answer is we do our best, but we can never be sure. Just the way no software coder can ever say that this code is bug free. It's only when it is detected. So there's no testing that is adequate enough. You continuously keep enhancing the testing process, so that you eliminate the silent errors.
Exactly.
I'm not sure if I've totally answered your question,
No,
but
that's
it's a difficult
exactly.
question to start with.
No, I agree. I agree. I mean, I agree. It's a hard question, but I think that's exactly right. There's no, like there is no comprehensive, right, kind of set of, set of tests, right? Like you can try to be as rigorous as as possible, right? But as models are changing and data is changing, and kind of technology is is evolving, there are always going to be always some things that are, that we're going to be exposed to. And I think this is, by the way, like a very similar to what we're seeing with cybersecurity, right? With cybersecurity, like nobody has an expectation, right, that we are completely covered, right, against all threats, right? We realize that we're always exposed, right, and then we're always kind of responsible for testing and kind of like mitigating these. And I'm curious. So, like, related to this is like, I'm curious with cybersecurity. That's something that is now kind of picking up, right? Where we're seeing a lot of usage of kind of a publicly available in general, like ML and the kind of like the fast development of ML, right, lies on using a lot of open source data, right, publicly available models, open source repositories, right. So we're kind of like introducing a lot of risk into the organization when we're kind of like relying on all these models for development. Are you seeing kind of AI security as as an area of focus like at Mastercard? Is this something that you guys are actively thinking about?
AI security is absolutely a subject that we pay very close attention to. We are seeing growing relevance over time. It's becoming more important because fraudsters are also using AI to make the attacks even more intelligent. So if I have to kind of categorize the challenges that we face with, I've kind of I mean more in terms of models. They can be categorized in two different areas. One is the attacks that we see against the effectiveness of our service, which are like data poisoning and adversarial attacks. So these are like how they can systematically add data that would then get used to build the models so that they start behaving the way the fraudsters would want the model to behave. And adversarial attacks would be just finding cracks within our training data so that they can kind of capitalize on that. And the second one is synthetic identities. So these, they work through over time, create identities so that they can add credibility over time, and then use those identities to create major attacks. And with regards to the to adversarial learning, we have been following a whole body of work that has been published by NIST on that. And I think there's a growing kind of awareness on the threat that kind of that is posed by adversarial attacks. And I truly believe that there is a need for products to help us fight against that fraud.
Yeah, no, yeah, amazing. No, I agree. Yeah, that's kind of like like a new area that like people haven't thought about, of course, like before, and now it's like it's coming up. So, but yeah, so Raheed, like this has been like super interesting. I'm so glad that we got a chance to chat about these things. I'm always just like really excited to see like all the things that you guys are doing at Mastercard with AI. It's like I think it's just on the bleeding edge. So very very happy to have this conversation. And yeah, looking forward to having you speak further at further conferences.
Super. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Rohit.
Thank you.